In 64 AD, a catastrophic fire swept through Rome, lasting 6 days and 7 nights. It destroyed vast swathes of the city and left countless Romans homeless. At the heart of this disaster lies a question that has puzzled historians for centuries. Was Emperor Nero responsible for the inferno? Nero, often remembered for his tyrannical rule, is accused by some sources of starting the fire. Yet other accounts suggest he was miles away in Antium when the tragedy struck. So, what's the truth? To unravel this mystery, we must examine the historical context. Rome, under Nero's rule, was a city of great political and social complexity. Nero, known for his extravagant projects and artistic ambitions, was a divisive figure. Did his grandiose plans for Rome's reconstruction necessitate the destruction of the old city? Or was he simply an easy target for blame in a city rife with political intrigue? Some ancient historians, like Tacitus, offer a more nuanced picture. They acknowledge that while Nero capitalized on the disaster to rebuild Rome according to his vision, there's no concrete evidence he orchestrated the fire. This contrasts sharply with the writings of later historians like Suetonius and Cassius Dio, who portray Nero as a madman delighting in the destruction. But history isn't just about what's written. It's about reading between the lines, understanding the biases of sources, and the context in which they were written. Could the accusations against Nero be politically motivated, an attempt to tarnish the legacy of a controversial emperor? Let's scrutinize these accounts with a critical eye to uncover the layers of this historical enigma. Our first stop is with Tacitus, a Roman historian who lived through the latter part of Nero's reign. In his annals, Tacitus details the fire's devastation but remains ambiguous about Nero's role. He writes, "To get rid of the report, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace." Tacitus suggests Nero used the fire as a pretext to persecute Christians, yet he stops short of directly accusing Nero of starting the blaze. Tacitus is often considered a more reliable source than some of his contemporaries due to his methodical approach to history and his relatively close proximity in time to the events he describes. Contrasting Tacitus, we have Suetonius and Cassius Dio, writing several decades later. They paint a more sinister picture of Nero. Suetonius, in his work The Lives of the 12 Caesars, asserts Nero secretly sent out men pretending to be drunk or engaged in other forms of mischief to ignite the city. Similarly, Cassius Dio in Roman History claims Nero sang the sack of Ilium in stage costume while the city was burning. However, it's crucial to note the potential biases in their writings. Both authors wrote under subsequent emperors, possibly influencing their portrayals of Nero. Tacitus, Cassius Dio, and Suetonius wrote in different periods, impacting the reliability of their accounts on Nero and the Great Fire of Rome. Tacitus lived between 56 and 120 AD, and wrote his annals within a few decades of the fire. This proximity potentially grants him access to more direct sources and eyewitness accounts, though it also places him within the political biases of the time. Suetonius lived just a few years later, between 69 and 122, making his account pretty close to the Great Fire of 64 AD. Cassius Dio was born in 155 AD and wrote his Roman History many years later. His account is shaped by the passage of time and the evolution of Nero's posthumous reputation. Cassius Dio, writing over a century later, is the furthest removed, relying more on secondary sources, which might dilute the accuracy but provides a perspective less influenced by the immediate political context. Each historian's reliability is thus a balance between their proximity to the events and the subsequent historical and political interpretation that could color their narratives. Exploring the possibility that Emperor Nero might have orchestrated the Great Fire of Rome, it's imperative to analyze the potential motivations and repercussions of such an act. This analysis provides a nuanced view of the event's plausibility. On one hand, if Nero did start the fire, it could be seen as a drastic strategy for urban renewal. The fire allowed for a massive reconstruction of Rome, aligning with Nero's vision for a grandiose cityscape. This included his ambitious project for a magnificent palace, the Domus Aurea, which we will describe later. Such a move, though extreme, fits with Nero's reputation for extravagance and his desire to leave a lasting architectural legacy. Additionally, the chaos of the fire might have served Nero politically. By diverting attention from his controversial rule, Nero could have used the crisis to consolidate power and distract from criticisms of his governance. In the turbulent realm of Roman politics, such a diversion could have been a strategic, if morally questionable, move. However, the cons of Nero starting the fire are significant and manifold. The immense destruction brought about by the fire would have risked massive public outrage. For an emperor whose power partly rested on public perception, orchestrating a disaster that resulted in considerable loss of life and property would be perilously counterproductive. It could undermine his authority and provoke unrest among the populace. Moreover, the economic and social upheaval caused by the fire would have been a substantial gamble. The instability following such a catastrophe could destabilize Nero's rule, making it a risky strategy for an emperor already facing political challenges. Finally, considering the historical context, there is little precedent for Roman emperors deliberately causing such large-scale destruction to their own capital. This rarity adds a layer of doubt to the claims of Nero's involvement. In the aftermath of the Great Fire of Rome, Emperor Nero's actions were crucial in shaping his legacy and influencing historical perceptions. Let's explore these actions with a focus on their implications and the context in which they occurred. Immediately following the fire, Nero's response was multifaceted. Firstly, he opened up his palaces to provide shelter for the homeless, offering relief to those who lost everything in the flames. This act of generosity, often overshadowed in historical narratives, showed a level of concern for the populace. Nero also implemented measures to prevent future disasters of similar magnitude. He revised the urban development of Rome, introducing building codes that mandated wider streets and the use of fire-resistant materials like stone. These regulations indicate a pragmatic approach to urban planning, reflective of a leader considering the welfare and future safety of his city. Furthermore, Nero launched a massive reconstruction effort. He envisioned a more splendid and architecturally advanced Rome, with the Domus Aurea at its heart. The Domus Aurea stretched over a significant portion of central Rome, covering areas from the Palatine to the Esquiline Hill. Contemporary historians, like Suetonius, describe it as an opulent complex with gardens, vineyards, and pastures, complete with flocks and herds. The palace itself was adorned with gold leaf, precious gems, and ivory. Frescoes and stucco decorations covered its walls and ceilings, showcasing the artistic zenith of the period. While this project showcased his grandiose ambitions, it also attracted criticism. The lavish nature of the construction, using public funds amidst the city's broader suffering, painted Nero as self-indulgent and disconnected from the struggles of ordinary Romans. A pivotal aspect of the narrative surrounding the Great Fire of Rome is the claim that Emperor Nero blamed Christians for the catastrophe. Let's dissect the sources of this claim and evaluate their credibility to understand whether Nero indeed pointed the finger at Christians, and if so, the veracity of these accusations. Tacitus, in his Annals, provides the primary account of Nero's persecution of Christians following the fire. He writes, "Nero fastened the guilt on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace." Tacitus portrays Nero's actions as a calculated move to divert blame from himself, noting the extreme and brutal punishments inflicted upon Christians. This account is our most direct source linking Nero to the persecution of Christians post-fire. Suetonius, in his Lives of the 12 Caesars, briefly mentions Nero's punitive actions against Christians. However, his account is less detailed regarding the fire and focuses more on Nero's general cruelty and tyranny. Suetonius does not explicitly connect the persecution with the fire, leaving ambiguity in his narrative. Cassius Dio, writing much later, does not provide specific details about Nero's treatment of Christians in the context of the fire. His work, therefore, offers little to either support or refute the claims made by Tacitus and Suetonius. In assessing the credibility of these accounts, particularly Tacitus, we must consider the historical context. Tacitus, writing a generation after the fire, may have had access to sources close to the events. However, his account also reflects the sentiments of the Roman elite, who were often hostile towards Christians and possibly towards Nero as well. This potential bias suggests that while the persecution of Christians likely occurred, it may have been framed within a narrative convenient for Nero's political opponents. Regarding the truthfulness of Nero's accusations against Christians, there is scant evidence outside these historical texts to corroborate the claim that Christians were responsible for the fire. The rapid spread and destruction caused by the fire suggest an accidental origin or, at least, one not specifically orchestrated by a small religious group. The absence of concrete evidence linking Christians to the fire's start, combined with the political usefulness of such a scapegoat for Nero, casts doubt on the veracity of these accusations. It's time to draw together the threads of history, analysis, and source evaluation to form a final judgment. After carefully examining the historical records, the context of Nero's reign, and the aftermath of the fire, it seems unlikely that Nero deliberately orchestrated the burning of Rome. The primary sources, while valuable, reveal biases and are sometimes contradictory. Tacitus and Suetonius, despite their accusations, do not provide conclusive evidence of Nero's guilt. Their accounts, written in a politically charged atmosphere, may have amplified rumors and hearsay, painting Nero as a convenient villain in a narrative shaped by political and social unrest. The practical considerations of intentionally starting such a catastrophic fire also weigh against Nero's involvement. The risk of immense public outrage and the potential destabilization of his rule would have been significant deterrents. Furthermore, the spontaneous nature of ancient urban fires, often due to accidents and closely packed structures, suggests a more likely accidental cause. On the other hand, Nero's actions following the fire paint a complex picture. His immediate relief efforts and the introduction of new urban planning regulations indicate a level of concern for the city's welfare and safety. The ambitious reconstruction of Rome, including his Domus Aurea, while criticized for extravagance, also demonstrates a desire to rebuild and enhance the city. In conclusion, the narrative of Nero as the instigator of the Great Fire appears to be more a product of political machinations and historical reinterpretation than a reflection of the truth. As with many figures of ancient history, Nero's story is a tapestry woven from fact, rumor, and the complexities of human character.